The morning sun cast long shadows across the busy downtown street when the first scream pierced the air. Glass exploded from the storefront window of Miller's Electronics, sending crystalline fragments dancing across the pavement like deadly confetti. People scattered in every direction, their morning routines shattered by the sudden violence that had erupted in their peaceful neighborhood. Officer Danny Martinez, fresh out of the academy with barely 6 months on the force, stood frozen behind his patrol car door. His hand trembled as it hovered over his service weapon. The suspect inside the store was clearly agitated, waving what appeared to be a knife while shouting incoherently at the terrified store owner who had pressed himself against the back wall. This wasn't like the training scenarios. This was real. The weight of his badge felt heavier than ever, and the eyes of the gathering crowd seemed to burn into his soul. They expected him to act, to protect, to serve. But fear had wrapped its cold fingers around his throat, and he couldn't move. The suspect's voice grew louder, more desperate. "I need the money. I need it now." The blade caught the morning light as he gestured wildly. Mr. Miller, the elderly shop owner, raised his hands in surrender, his face pale with terror. Danny's radio crackled with dispatch asking for a status update, but he couldn't find his voice. His breathing became shallow and sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cool morning air. The crowd behind him whispered among themselves, their confidence in his ability clearly wavering. Then, cutting through the chaos like a blade through silk, came a voice from the sidewalk. It wasn't loud, but it carried an authority that made everyone turn. "Kid, get behind me." From the small crowd of onlookers stepped a man who seemed to belong to the shadows of the city. His clothes were worn and patched, layers of fabric that had seen too many seasons. His gray beard that was unkempt, and his boots had holes that spoke of countless miles, walked on unforgiving concrete. To anyone passing by, he was just another face in the city's forgotten population, another homeless soul that most people learned to look past. But when he spoke, something changed in the air itself. "Listen carefully," the man said, his voice steady as granite. "The suspect is right-handed. See how he's holding the blade? He's not trained. He's scared, probably desperate for drug money or rent. His stance is all wrong for someone who knows how to fight." Danny stared at the stranger, confused, but somehow reassured by the calm authority in his voice. "You need to establish verbal contact," the man continued, moving closer to Danny's position. "Keep your weapon holstered for now. He hasn't hurt anyone yet, which means he doesn't want to. He's looking for a way out." The stranger's eyes were sharp and calculating as they surveyed the scene. He noticed details that Danny had missed in his panic. The suspect's nervous glances towards the back exit, the way he kept wiping his free hand on his jeans, the fact that he hadn't made any real threats toward the store owner. "Call for backup," the man instructed, his voice carrying the unmistakable tone of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "Tell them we have a Code 3 situation. Single suspect, possible 211 in progress, but no injuries yet. Request a negotiator if they have one available." Danny found himself reaching for his radio without question. There was something about this man's presence that cut through his fear like a lighthouse beam through fog. As he made the call, he noticed the stranger had positioned himself at an angle that gave him a clear view of both the storefront and the suspect's likely escape routes. "Good," the man said when Danny finished the call. "Now, you're going to approach the window, but stay at least 10 feet back. Use your vehicle's PA system if you have one. Speak slowly and clearly. Tell him you want to help him find a way out of this that doesn't hurt anyone. The suspect inside the store had noticed the commotion outside. His head turned toward the window, and for a moment, his eyes met the stranger's gaze. Something passed between them, a recognition that went deeper than sight. This wasn't just another bystander. The way the man stood, the way he assessed the situation, the way he commanded respect without raising his voice, it all spoke of training, experience, and a kind of confidence that couldn't be faked. The suspect's grip on the knife loosened slightly. The wild desperation in his movements began to give way to uncertainty. He was no longer the only predator in this scenario, and some primal part of his brain recognized that the balance of power had shifted. "Sir," Danny called out, his voice stronger now with the stranger's guidance. "I'm Officer Martinez. I can see you're upset about something. Why don't we talk about it? Maybe we can work something out." The stranger nodded approvingly. "Good. Keep your tone calm. Don't make any sudden movements." He's starting to realize he's in over his head. As if to prove the point, the suspect lowered the knife slightly and took a step back from Mr. Miller. I just need some money, man. I'm not trying to hurt nobody." "I understand," Danny replied, feeling more confident with each word. "Money problems are tough, but this isn't the way to solve them. Why don't you put the knife down and we can talk about getting you some help?" The stranger moved closer to Danny, his voice dropping to a whisper. He's about to break. See how his shoulders are sagging? The adrenaline is wearing off, and reality is setting in. This is the critical moment. If you push too hard, he might panic. If you don't push enough, he might bolt. "What do you want me to do?" Danny asked, no longer questioning why he was taking orders from a homeless man. "Tell him about the back exit," the stranger said. "Let him know you're aware of it, but also let him know that running will only make things worse. Give him the choice to surrender with dignity." Danny keyed his radio again, speaking to the suspect. "Listen, I know there's a back door to that store, but my backup is already on the way, and they'll be covering all the exits. If you run, this is going to get a lot more complicated. But if you put down the knife and walk out the front door with your hands up, I give you my word that no one will hurt you." The suspect looked around wildly, as if seeing the situation clearly for the first time. The knife trembled in his hand, and tears began to stream down his face. "I'm sorry, man. I'm so sorry. I don't know what I was thinking." "That's it," the stranger whispered. "He's done. Move in slowly. Keep talking to him." Danny approached the storefront, his weapon still holstered, his hands visible. "It's okay. Everyone makes mistakes. The important thing is how we handle them. Are you ready to put the knife down?" The suspect nodded, sobbing now. He placed the knife on the counter and raised his hands above his head. "I'm sorry, Mr. Miller. I'm so sorry." The elderly store owner, shaken but unharmed, simply nodded. "It's okay, son. It's okay." As Danny moved in to secure the suspect, he could hear the sirens of approaching backup units. The stranger had been right about everything. The suspect's psychological state, his likely actions, and the best approach to resolve the situation peacefully. Danny cuffed the suspect gently, reading him his rights in a calm, professional manner. The man didn't resist, his earlier desperation replaced by a kind of relieved exhaustion. As the backup officers arrived, and took over the scene, Danny turned to thank the stranger who had guided him through his first real crisis. But the man was already walking away, an old army surplus backpack slung over his shoulder, his worn boots carrying him back towards the shadows of the city from which he had emerged. "Wait!" Danny called out, jogging after him. "Please wait a minute!" The stranger paused, but didn't turn around immediately. When he did, Danny saw something in his eyes that he hadn't noticed before. A deep sadness, the kind that comes from carrying too much weight for too long. "Who are you?" Danny asked, breathless from the adrenaline and the short run. "How did you know what to do back there?" The man smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Just someone who used to wear a badge too, kid. A long time ago. But I've never seen you around here before. Are you from another department? Are you undercover?" The stranger shook his head slowly. "No, son. I'm exactly what I look like. Just an old man who's been living on these streets for longer than I care to remember." Danny's mind raced. "But the way you handled that situation, the way you knew exactly what to do, that doesn't just come from nowhere." "No," the man agreed. "It doesn't. But that's a story for another day. You did good back there, officer. Trust your instincts. They're better than you think." As he turned to leave again, Danny called out one more time, "At least tell me your name. I need to include you in my report." The stranger paused, considering. "Call me Mike Thompson, but I doubt you'll find me in any of your databases." With that, he disappeared into the crowd of people who had gathered to watch the aftermath of the incident. Danny stood there for a moment, watching him go, before returning to complete his paperwork and debrief with his sergeant. But Mike Thompson's words and actions stayed with him throughout the rest of his shift. That evening, after he had finished his reports and gone home, Danny couldn't shake the feeling that there was much more to the story than what he had seen. He opened his laptop and began searching through police databases, starting with the name Mike Thompson. There were dozens of results, but none of them seemed to match the man he had met. He tried searching for retired officers in the area, former SWAT team members, anyone who might fit the description. After hours of searching, he found it buried in the archived records of the city's police department. Detective Michael Thompson, formerly of the SWAT division, decorated officer with 2 Bronze Stars for valor, exemplary service record spanning 15 years. But then the record stopped abruptly. There was a notation about extended leave, followed by a resignation. Danny dug deeper, accessing newspaper archives and public records. The story that emerged was heartbreaking. Officer Thompson had been off duty when his wife and 8-year-old daughter were killed in a car accident caused by a drunk driver. The same drunk driver had been arrested by Thompson's own department 6 times in the previous 2 years, but had never served more than a weekend in jail due to legal technicalities and overcrowded facilities. The newspaper articles chronicled Thompson's gradual descent into despair. He had become obsessed with the case, spending his own money on private investigators, filing lawsuit after lawsuit, trying to find some way to make sense of a senseless tragedy. His work performance suffered, and eventually he was placed on administrative leave. The last article was from 5 years ago. It mentioned that Thompson had been seen living in various homeless encampments around the city, but that he had refused all offers of help from his former colleagues and the department's counseling services. Danny stared at the screen, pieces of the puzzle falling into place. The man who had guided him through his first crisis, who had shown such professional expertise and calm authority, was a broken hero who had lost everything that mattered to him. The next morning, Danny drove to the area where he had last seen Mike Thompson. He spent his lunch break and several hours after his shift walking through the neighborhoods where homeless populations gathered, checking shelters and soup kitchens, asking if anyone had seen the man who had helped him. No one had, or if they had, they weren't saying. The homeless community had its own code, its own way of protecting those who needed protection. Danny continued his search for weeks, but Mike Thompson seemed to have vanished as completely as he had appeared. It was as if he had stepped out of the shadows for just long enough to help a young officer in need, then faded back into the invisible population of the city's forgotten. Months passed. Danny's confidence grew with each call he responded to. He found himself thinking about Thompson's lessons in every tense situation. Assess the scene, understand the psychology, find the human connection. The techniques worked, and Danny's reputation as a skilled officer began to grow. Then, one evening, nearly a year later, Danny was patrolling the same area where he had first met Mike Thompson. As he drove past the spot where the electronics store incident had occurred, he noticed something different. There was a small memorial on the sidewalk, not the kind you usually see for crime victims, but something more personal. A few flowers, a small American flag, and a note. Danny parked and walked over to investigate. The note was weathered, as if it had been there for some time, but the words were still legible. For the rookie who didn't give up. Keep serving with honor. A fellow officer. Danny looked around, hoping to catch a glimpse of the man who had changed his life. But the street was empty except for the usual evening traffic. He knelt down and straightened the small flag, then added his own note to the memorial. Thank you, Mike. You saved more than just that store that day. You saved a cop's career and maybe his soul too. As he walked back to his patrol car, Danny realized that he might never see Mike Thompson again. But the lessons he had learned, the confidence he had gained, and the reminder that heroes come in all forms, these were gifts that would stay with him for the rest of his career. Some people spend their whole lives looking for a moment to make a difference. Others, like Mike Thompson, carry the weight of their past tragedies but still find the strength to step forward when someone needs help. They don't need uniforms or badges or recognition. They just need a moment, one brief moment, to remind the world who they really are underneath all the pain and loss and years of being invisible. Danny drove off into the night, carrying with him the knowledge that somewhere in the city shadows, a broken hero was still watching, still protecting, still serving in his own quiet way. And that maybe, just maybe, that's the most heroic thing of all. The story spread through the department quietly, the way good stories do. Other officers began to pay more attention to the homeless population in their areas, not just as potential problems to be managed, but as people with their own stories, their own histories, their own potential for heroism. And sometimes, late at night when Danny was patrolling the streets he had come to know so well, he would slow down when he passed groups of people living rough, wondering if one of them might be Mike Thompson, still out there, still ready to step forward when someone needed help. Because that's what heroes do. They don't always wear capes or carry badges. Sometimes they wear torn boots and carry everything they own in an old backpack. But when the moment comes, When someone needs them most, they step out of the shadows and remind us all that courage isn't about the absence of fear. It's about doing what's right despite the fear. And in a world that often seems to have forgotten what heroism looks like, that's a lesson worth remembering. That's a story worth telling. That's a reminder that somewhere, in the most unexpected places, heroes are still walking among us, waiting for their moment to shine.